that's a triple play. New episodes, I couldn't wait. Yeah. Open your mind at the first gate. Press play, no need to debate. AoA, check me out. Look, plugged in, you can catch the hype. Golden Dawn, how we follow the light. Anime like life, married to it, my wife.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages? Welcome back to the AoA show. I'm your host, as always, Ian, along with my boy Isaiah.
Yo, yo, yo.
And today we're here to talk about Jujutsu Kaisen episode 10. What was the name of this one, Isaiah?
Idol Transfiguration.
Thank you, my man. So we are talking about a couple major things that happen within this episode. There's really not too many events, just quantity-wise, but there's certainly some quality that happens in this episode between the conversations, the fights, motivations, and philosophies on life, literally. So yeah, it's going to be a fun conversation. If you guys enjoy the content, I'm going to try not to stutter so much in my plugs, but if you guys enjoy the content today, you like what it is we do, please make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, sharing with your friends, and commenting your thoughts down below. What did you think of our discussion? What did you think of this episode? What are your thoughts on Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole? And what do you have to add to said discussion based off the things that we talked about today? Everything you do really goes a long way. So we're going to hop into the first point here, and that is the conversation that Mahito has with Junpei. And we find out that he can essentially manipulate one's soul because the soul is not something that cannot be tampered with. It is a literal physical object, or at least to Mahito it is someone who can mess with it, which makes him really, to me, that much more evil as a character, knowing now that he doesn't really just mess with the physical flesh, or he does by default because he messes with the soul, more importantly. So it literally kind of distorts what you are. It's like, are you still even human at that point? What are you now? You're something completely different, because he can distort that, which makes him a terrifying villain to go up against. And anyone who potentially dies by his hand, it's like, I feel really sad. Like Kento fighting him, I'm not going to lie, which we'll get into, but I'm really scared because it's like anyone that goes up against him and loses, that terrible fate is going to happen to them. So the stakes are high, when it comes to him. It's not like you just get, a volcano shot in your face and you just immediately get incinerated or something like that. It's like your actual being is being defiled, essentially, right? So this guy is not to be messed with. Don't sleep on this guy. He is a true evil son of a bitch. But he has his conversation with Junpei and essentially goes over his life philosophy, which is that life doesn't matter, essentially. He says, because the soul is malleable, because I can tamper with it, because it is a physical object, that means that there is nothing intrinsically tied to it per se, in terms of moral codes and values and all that kind of stuff. So really whatever you want to do, you can do whenever, which really means that nothing means anything anyway, which is a interesting philosophy, one I personally don't agree with. And also we don't know that souls are little crystal shards. So there's that. This is, specific to the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, obviously. So his theory is a little more supported, I guess, in his eyes. But definitely crazy. And it seems like Junpei is almost like this sponge that is learning all this, but like he doesn't, like he kind of has banter with him, but he kind of just like lets him talk a lot of times, which is interesting because I don't know where Junpei's allegiances are going to lie when all the chips fall. It seems as if they're trying to make it where Mahito's almost like this mentor or person that's trying to lead Junpei along. He's trying to feed on those base desires of hate, etc. that Junpei definitely has, as do all people. But I don't know. I don't know if Junpei necessarily is totally like putting his bill in there, like putting his vote in the curse camp. I don't know. I think especially with it, we're going to see in the future episodes, but his conversations with Itadori will definitely, be the determining factor here. Like, I think he's just kind of in the air. He doesn't really know how to handle people's dislike of him beyond, hey, I could maybe kill them now that he listens to Mahito's philosophy on life. So I was curious to know your thoughts, Isaiah, if you had any on this conversation in particular, and the fact if you wanted to add that he made the little tiny humans, like the world's smallest violin, but he also is trying to make the huge one as well. But hit me, what do you got?
So I don't know. I think as far as the Mahito Junpei stuff, like Junpei he clearly now seems to be on the fence, but I do ultimately think that he is going to, I think that Mahito is obviously trying to use him, right? That he's like, hey, this kid has a lot of raw, cursed energy, right? Like a lot of like derived from this intense emotions that he feels about people and like the events and things that have happened to him in his life. And we know this just from his interaction with the teacher. It's hard for me to be like, well, yeah, Junpei, like, why are you like this? Because this man has a shitty end of the stick. Literally nobody in this kid's life seems to be on his side, right? Whether it's a bully that is directly antagonizing him, whether it's a teacher that just idly watches by and then like defends the bullies. This whole like fucked up like, hierarchy system here in his life, it seems. And so with Junpei having these kinds of thoughts of like, wow, like I don't understand why these people do what they do, why they would act the way they'd act unless like this emotion, this feeling is warranted. Like it's something that you're supposed to like feel and like this is what people are supposed to be yearning towards. Now, obviously, between his conversation and when Mahito puts his input in, in typical like shonen, it's severely skewed, right? But again, I think it's easy for somebody who wasn't bullied anywhere nearly to the capacity of Junpei to say that, because I don't think his feelings are unwarranted. I don't think they're invalid. I just think that obviously they don't need to be acted upon in said way. There's better ways to handle any and all of your emotions than sort of acting purely out of them. But Mahito doesn't, for lack of a better, doesn't care, right? I think he sees that in Junpei and he's like, oh, cool, great, I'm going to use this. And to be honest, I don't even know if it's like a thing of, he's like, oh, I need this thing from Junpei to like perfect my goal of whatever I'm trying to do or my vision. Or if I just see something interesting in this kid and he doesn't seem to act and think like other people and I want to fuck with that until I get bored. And then who knows, he might even end up just turning Junpei into a cursed human spirit, whatever you want to call it. Because that's the kind of character that Mahito strikes me as, is like really this like fly by night, but like he's got his ideals and his philosophies, but like he is very fluid with he's just kind of like, we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? I'm trying to do this thing, but like also kind of having fun with it. And I don't really have a whole lot of strict rules or stipulations, which is why it's great that he goes up against someone like Kento, who is the polar opposite of that, one. But two, because of their literal, if you break down like the actual fight, Kento is a close ranged fighter, and so is Mahito. But like that's the whole thing. It's like you can't. Mahito's game is over if because Kento is a sorcerer, so he has a little bit more of durability. Like he even says he's like, you're able to use curse energy to sort of like subconsciously block out my ability. But you can only do that for so long. So it's interesting seeing them stacked up in more ways than one, because it's like, okay, whose side is gonna give out, I guess, ultimately first. And like you said, there's quite a lot on the table for if Kento loses. It's not just like lights out, 6 feet under, move on. It's like, no, we'll probably see him again as some, de-shaped, cursed spirit, humified like thing, which no doubt Itadori or somebody will have to fight, and that's got its own whole fucking thing of whatever. But I do think ultimately that Junpei like will end up succumbing to Mahito's game, because I think unfortunately Junpei has had a lot of shit thrown at him and nobody to help him correctly process it. And so as, crazy and backwards maybe and fucked up as Mahito's way of thinking seems, it's the only thing in his life, at least that we've seen, that has aligned close enough with his way of thinking for him, like that it makes him feel validated just for thinking this way and just for being like, and I think that's going to be, unfortunately, enough for him to be like, you know what? Yeah, fuck it. And I think that's, again, unfortunate, because I think it might really be a situation where Mahito's like, all right, cool. Like, that's cool, but whatever. I don't care. Like, go mummy now. Like, just turn him into a whatever. So yeah, I definitely, I think the relationship between them and a lot of the lore, this was like a very, explanation lore heavy episode where it's like, Mahito breaks down his powers, but he breaks down like how they work in conjunction with cursed spirits, humans, anything and everything that has a soul. And I think it's interesting. It's going to be interesting going forward to see what the caveats are in that. Because even like, again, to sort of compare Kento to Mahito, even Kento has stipulations, let's just say, to his ability. And so I wonder where the, because for all intents and purposes, Mahito just sort of seems like, I can make, anything I touch, I can corrupt or bend the soul to my will and make it whatever I want. But there has to be, at least to keep the, keep the plot, let's call it, interesting, there has to be some drawback, right? There has to be some either stipulation where he can't do it X amount of times, or he can only do it if he acquires like the right kind of person. I don't know, because he even says, he's like, oh, I'd be very curious to use my ability on a sorcerer, because I've never done it before. I've only used it on regular humans. So I'm definitely interested to see where this relationship between Junpei and Mahito goes, because I think that Junpei might again end up being like just kind of his perfect test subject, if anything. But yeah, that was really kind of like for most of the episode anyway. I mean, we have, the fight with Kento and Mahito, which we could break down and talk about a little bit. There's, the little comedic beats that we get with Itadori and I don't remember his name, but the assistant guy, with their plan to sort of get Junpei's attention or to figure out how much he knows. That's basically, at least for the bulk of it, which I said was the Mahito Junpei part. That's sort of my 2 cents.
Yeah. You kind of went into the fight, which is the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which you expounded some thoughts on if you wanted to say more. But I will say, I guess one of the drawbacks, at least that I see from Mahito's move, if you want to call it a drawback, is the fact that he can't straight up the second he touches a sorcerer, like you were saying, be able to, it's almost like we were reading Solo Leveling today, and it was like, oh, the poison effect he kept on using on the blade wasn't working on people that were higher. Or if it's like a Jedi mind trick, right? Like if the person's mind and will is strong, it's not going to work. Right. Same concept where it's like, he can't just go up to Gojo and be like, tag, you're an abomination now, right? Same thing with Kento. This cursed spirit Mahito's very lucky because he's incredibly powerful. But I guess that would be the drawback, that it's like he has to touch you multiple times or be in contact with you for an extended period of time, and that could definitely leave him open. As we see, Kento during the fight, does slash his arm off. I mean, he's able to regenerate, because why wouldn't he? But I mean, so that could be a drawback. Also with the just to go back for a second with your point with Junpei, definitely a solid prediction. I would say the only thing that can maybe deter him from that will be Itadori. And I'm curious to see what kind of impact, if any, Itadori has on him. And I think that's where his protagonist vibes will really be flexed here, to see it's like, okay, you're a world-class athlete in high school, just because you have the most powerful curse in you ever, and you're kind of working in tandem right now with Sukuna. You have this crazy latent ability and potential, but like, how good are you at like actually swaying people towards the side of good and what is right? Like, sure, you can't fight your way out of every single situation. Like, sometimes the right thing to do is not destroy the person, but to be like, hey, maybe you could see it this way and see if he, those skills are going to be really put to the test to see if he can or not. And he's such a goofball. I just can't wait for that conversation just in general, or how he pants that teacher is actually hysterical. But anyway, getting into the fight, like you were saying, you already expounded some things there, but interesting because I love Kento's ability, the fact that he could just like pinpoint your weak spots, so that was really cool. But then, as you were saying, Mahito is just extra terrifying because he's like, oh well, I have like a bunch of humans in my pocket like they're jelly beans, because I could have them be this tiny, and because they don't have to stay this tiny though, like I can do whatever. So he essentially has the ability to make any sort of distorted shape and or size that at least that physics will allow him, with a seemingly infinite number of humans, or at least as many as he could fit in his bag or whatever he's rocking, right? So that's scary, right? And the fact that they are also, because I was saying at the one point when Kento's fighting him and the one is crying, he's like, please help me, the human. I'm like, this is just jacked up in so many different ways. Yeah. And it goes back to the nurse or the forensic analyst or whatever. And she's like, don't worry. Like they're already kind of screwed before. So like, don't feel so bad. And the guy's like, oh no, actually they're not. You know what I mean? He's like, actually, if you were taking solace in that, don't, because they could totally, like he's like, I've been experimenting with it, but point is, it's like, they could kind of feel it, but they can't, it's not exactly like that lady said, like you're still kind of a dick for doing it. So, Kento tries to pull the whole stoic, like, I don't let, these personal feelings. And then this is again where Mahito is really terrifying, because he's like, no, you're lying straight up. Because like, I could read your soul, which basically means I could read your mind and body and everything there is to do with anything. Thoughts. So it's he that's some scary shit right there. That fight was really cool. I love Kento's character, how he's like, what is it? 5:30? I clocked in at 10. He's like, 6. And I ain't going a minute over. It's just like, I love this character, dude. He is so funny, and like just not even trying to be though. That's what makes him funny. And just like his whole aesthetic, the way he fights, like everything, he's just hilarious. And then they get into their brawl or whatever. And towards the end of that, Then it's like 6:01. He's like, we're going to overtime. That was just so hype when he said that. He started, and it looks like we're going to see another ability revealed in this next episode. Will it be enough? Find out next time. But I mean, you know, that will be some interesting stuff. But beyond that, I really don't know if there was much that we were missing in terms of the episode beyond the fight and kind of where people's life philosophies line up. You know, in terms of that, I think Junpei definitely stole out of the spotlight in this episode. You know, in a good way. You know, I'm curious to see where his character winds up and the influences the Mahito, Itadori, etc. have on him. We had some funny moments as per usual. They're chock full of them, and they're great. I have to say, they genuinely make me laugh every single time. But yeah, is there anything I'm missing within this episode? Someone in the comments is going to be like, oh my God, you missed this particular thing? Are you dumb? Do you even pay attention at all to what you are watching? Sort of. So anyway, but I don't know if there's anything else or if you want to add anything on the fight, because I know you were talking about it a little bit, if you want to say anything else.
I mean, I really do. Again, I like his Kento's humor in relation to the character, and I think it works mostly because of the circumstances. It's like he's basically an exorcist, and he's like, "Oh, I'm worried about my timesheet though. How does that attendance look?" And it's like it's not important right now, but nonetheless, it is a joy to watch, and I do think it's interesting that he also seems to have some sort of trump card with his, you know, he tied his tie around his fist, and then Mahito makes a remark that his curse energy spiked. So I kind of think we might maybe see Kento's domain, possibly.
That'd be cool.
I don't know,
probably a classroom or something like a cubicle or something.
Classes in session.
Yeah,
starts whipping you around. So I'm definitely excited to see where that fight, plus just the little tidbit of the fight that we got in the preamble or whatever for the next episode looked dope, just animation wise. And I'm excited to see, like you said, to be honest, because I think it'll be very much a determining factor if Itadori's likeableness or you know, main character energy, whatever you want to call it, will be enough to persuade Junpei to maybe see things differently or not go ahead and align himself with Mahito. But you know, I honestly feel like it's 50-50.
Yeah, to be determined.
Yeah.
But anyway, folks, that is our discussion today. Short one, but chock full of some cool stuff. Let us know again in those comments what you thought of today's episode of our discussion. Did we miss anything? But be nice. What are your predictions going forward? Don't spoil anything if you're a manga reader. You know who you are. True. Anyway, folks, a lot of fun today. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, the whole nine. You know the drill. But until next time, we'll catch you on the flip. Peace.
Ninjas are samurais, blaze of the kunais. Find me in the leaf of the cloud, screaming out Bankai. We just some ghouls though, who like seeing parts fly.